Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Thursday Strategy for Success webinar. We have a jam-packed session for you today. We are so fortunate to have Jim Pipper and Amber Cordoba joining us today to discuss everything you need to know about this new round of PPP funding and the steps that you need to take. So I am going to go ahead and introduce both of our featured panelists today before we get started. Mr. Pipper is a seasoned employee with the SBA with many years of experience assisting entrepreneurs to either start and or expand their business opportunities using the SBA's programs and services. Jim is particularly proud of the assistance he's been able to provide to veterans, active duty military, National Guard and Reserve members, military spouses, and family members in his capacity as National Award-winning Veteran Business Development Officer. Wow, that's a mouthful. In his capacity, Jim is the district office program liaison for both the AZ Boots to Business and Boots to Business Reboot programs that are being delivered to all transitioning uniform personnel in Arizona by the Veteran Business Development Center. He is a Vietnam era combat veteran that proudly served in the United States Air Force and was appointed by the Phoenix City Council to serve on the inaugural Phoenix Military Veterans Commission under Mayor Phil Gordon for 11 years. In addition to his veteran duties, he is the International Trade Officer, Arizona Statewide Sport Liaison, District Surety Bond Guarantee Program Officer, and the local liaison for SBA with the U.S. Commercial Service co-located within the SB District Office. Jim has also served as a special asset officer with commercial banks for 5 years and is a former small business owner. He and his wife, Barbara, are the proud parents of 6 children, 18 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. In his leisure time, he likes being outdoors and enjoys a round of golf. I'm not sure how you have time to do all of that. You are a busy, busy man. Well, thank you for joining us. We also have Amber Cordoba, the Director of Business Education and Consulting Services for Chicanos por la Causa. Since 2015, Amber Cordoba has worked to remove the barriers that small businesses face in accessing quality business education and affordable access to capital. In 2020, she led the Prestamos CDFI team through the first round of PPP lending, and in 2021 is focused on outreach, training, and small business assistance, resulting in the expansion of access to the PPP program with an emphasis on supporting underserved communities. Thank you, Amber. I know that businesses are so fortunate to have your guidance and your support as they navigate all of these funding. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Jim. I will pull up your presentation for you.
Hey, thank you so much, Amber and Carly. Thank you both for joining today, and Carly, for you coordinating this. Appreciate it very much. All right. Good morning, everybody. And I would like to take just a moment as I start this PowerPoint presentation to remind a lot of the folks that are on the call today that this is the same PowerPoint that we continue to use that was introduced, like it said, on January 14th. It's still relevant. And so we're going to kind of spin through it because it has been discussed at many webinars, and most is, in fact, probably have seen it. But we're going to go over it a little bit and throw in some additional information about the PPP program and where we're at right now. But I want to first mention or read the bottom section of this slide. It says, this presentation provides a general overview of the PPP related to provisions in and this is a mouthful, folks, economic aid to hard-hit small businesses, nonprofits, and the Venues Act, parentheses, the Economic Aid Act. In the event of any inconsistency between this presentation and the Economic Aid Act, the PPP Flexibility Act of 2020, the CARES Act, PPP interim final rulings, PPP frequently asked questions, PPP application forms and instructions, and other PPP guidance, together official guidance, parentheses, the official guidance governs. I'm mentioning that because the program obviously is a work in progress right now. There is a lot of pieces to the puzzle that haven't quite come together yet. And my job and our staff's job here at the Arizona District Office is to keep everybody as abreast as the developments occur as possible. So you can tell from what I just read that it is a moving target. So bear with us. We're trying to get the information as it's given to us. I want to also mention that our new administrator nominee was before Congress yesterday. Her name is Isabella Casellas Guzman. She is the nominee to be our new SBA administrator. And I was able to catch part of it yesterday, and she talked about many of our programs, including the Paycheck Protection Program that we're going to talk about today. And she mentioned, as she was queried by the congressional folks that were involved, that many of these things will be her first priority. So we look for things to happen pretty quickly, including her nomination. So next slide, please.
Sorry, Jim, having a little bit of a pause here.
Okay. Thank you. And you can go past that. Thank you. Okay, and next slide. Let's go through the next slide. This one's pretty okay. All these dates have come and gone, and we started, and the reason we have Amber with us today is she was one of those community partners, CFIs, that was one of the first to initially get the Paycheck Protection Program, what we call 2.0, out and delivered. And you can tell from the other dates that everybody now is participating. But yesterday, and again already this morning, I've received several calls from folks that are having trouble finding somebody that they say, they're telling us on the phone that we can't get PPP help. We don't know who to go to, et cetera, et cetera. So there's still some confusion. So you folks might be fielding questions from folks that are trying to get a PPP loan. And please tell them that the program is open to all of our banks. Our lender relations side of our office is working tirelessly to get all of our PPP lenders, and most of them are. I had one call where someone said Chase Bank is not making PPP loans. That's just, I don't know where that information came from. They said it was given to them from a branch. That's just not the case. On any given day, Chase Bank is one of our top PPP loan program participants. So just a heads up on that. Next slide, please. All right. The PPP loan eligibility now includes different types from the first program that was rolled out in March of last year. And there's additional eligible expenses that have been introduced on this round. And there's some changes in the timeline on the proceeds as well. You can read this slide to yourself. The most important part of this slide is March 31st. It's a relatively short time frame. For those of you that were tracking this during the first round, we all watched the funds deplete pretty quickly. We're anticipating that might be the case now, but right now funding is still available, and everything is a green go right now. So just keep March 31st. So if you're talking to somebody and they're panicking, tell them that to get on the bandwagon as quick as possible, but that funds right now are available through March 31st. Next slide, please. All right. The new folks, and I'm hoping, since we have many of the chambers on this webinar, I'm hoping that the chambers see there that the 501c6 organizations such as chambers are eligible now. So I hope everybody has a desire to do so has been able to do that. And I'd like to know if that isn't the case, and I'd like to hear and have a private conversation with you, and let's see what's happening. I know a lot of the chambers were hoping that was going to be the case. Still eligible is our same business entities, partnerships, corporations, LLCs, individuals, independent operators, sole proprietors, independent contractors, self-employed individuals, and so forth, and our tribal businesses as well. So, next slide, please. Okay, for borrowers that previously received a PPP loan, and we've talked to many of them, and have 300 employees or less, and that's a change. The first round was 500 employees, so 300 now, and suffered a 25% reduction in gross receipts. It's you can easily do the math. It's not complicated, but for some reason or another, a lot of individuals still struggle with that, and that's where all you that are on this call that can help us get the word out, we sure appreciate you helping them through the math, and also introducing the second bullet point, the NIAX code 72, the changes in the second draw PPP loan uses a 3.5 average monthly rather than a 2.5 as was previously issued under the first draw. Next slide, please. Okay, some additional criteria is, again, I've already mentioned it, but 300 employees, he has no more than 300 employees, that is a change, and also can demonstrate at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts. And that's important, and we've been helping a lot of people with that. Our resource partners have been helping a lot of people, and I'm sure Amber is going to be addressing that a little bit in her presentation as well. So next slide, please. Forgiveness is a big topic, and often it seems to be confusing. So I'm just going to go over the bullet points and direct your attention to some assistance that is often overlooked, as we've been getting one call after another about forgiveness. But the idle advances are no longer deducted from forgiveness payment. That's a change. Forgiven PPP loans are not taxable income. Expenses paid with PPP loan funds are now taxable. So it refers to consult the IRS. I've been sending out to some of our IRS community outreach partner. She is good to work with, and so pay attention to those IRS notifications that they have sent to me, and I'm forwarding them to you as a blanket email that's going out. Expanded forgivable expenses are permissible for any PPP loan not already forgiven, and coming soon. It's actually here. Simplified forgiveness application for PPP loans under $150,000. So, as to clarify some of the confusion with the forgiveness, your best opportunities, we have some marvelous resource partners that I just sent out a blanket email this morning regarding our SCORE services, Service Corps of Retired Executives. We have them ramped up to assist. Our small business development centers, all of them, we have them ramped up to help with forgiveness. Chicanos por la Causa is ramped up to help for forgiveness. So there is a lot of help, and it's all on our website, our state website. So please take time, and I always say this, but please take time to look at our state website, sba.gov/AZ. It's real easy to get to. We got a big yellow ribbon on the homepage, COVID-19. Click on that, and it's loaded with information about how to navigate through any problem that you can possibly have these days through the PPP process. So next slide, please. There you go. Here's what I'm suggesting. And on our website, I would like you to, if you have a client or somebody you know that tells you, like I've been getting, what lender should I go to? Well, here you go. Here's a lender match on our website. It lines them up. It's real easy peasy. It's not complicated. It will line them up with a lender. Visit sba.gov/PPP for most up-to-date documents. Local assistance is on there. And more importantly, subscribe to our SBA e-newsletter and for updates. Once you get on that bandwagon, we'll keep you updated as to information that we get on a daily basis. And I mentioned when I began my presentation that our new administrator is coming on board, and you can expect some changes and some action that has kind of been pending for a few, well, let's say a couple of days, couple of weeks, but nevertheless, it's going to roll out pretty quick. I'm not new to the SBA. I've been with the SBA for a long time. I've been through several administration changes, and I can tell you firsthand that we are going to start getting some marching orders come Monday morning, I'm guessing. So that's soon. And I'll try to keep everybody posted on all these, as well as our resource partners. And like I mentioned earlier, our lead lender relations specialist, Craig Jordan, some of you know Craig and his team. They're working tirelessly at keeping our lenders up to speed, answering their questions so they know how to help folks coming to their banks for PPP loans. And together, I think we'll muster our way through this. I know it may be challenging at times, and I know we all know how frustrating things have gotten at times. And once again, I want to appreciate Carly and what the chamber, the Chandler Chamber is doing, as well as many of the other chambers. Without your guys' help, we would be in duck soup. I'll use that term. I'm old enough to use that one. Some of you young, like Carly there, yeah, she's there. What is duck soup? All right, let's now go to my friend and soon to be yours, Amber. Amber, you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. I will pull up your slide deck here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jim, for all that wonderful information. All right, so I am with Chicanos por la Causa, Prestamos CDFI. We are a 50-plus-year-old organization here in Phoenix, Arizona, but we're also in Nevada as well. So some of you may be familiar with CPLC and what we do, but our Prestamos division is a CDFI. We're a small business lender and a mission-driven lender. So I'll be talking to you today specifically about the lender perspective and items that you're going to want to have prepared. We are accepting applications and would be more than happy to work with you as your lender, but this information should be usable no matter what lender that you go through. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to go through some of the stuff that Jim already talked about. I'm going to kind of breeze through, but just a quick recap of what is the PPP program. It's a forgivable SBA loan program, and the intent of the program is to provide some funding to keep employees on staff, on payroll, and for business continuity. So it's really geared towards supporting keeping employees employed and supporting those that are self-employed, that get self-employment income that have been impacted by COVID-19. It's a fixed 5-year term loan. So I do like to point out that this is a loan and you apply for forgiveness. Now we've had a great success. 100% of the loans that we have submitted through to the SBA for forgiveness have received full forgiveness. We haven't had a single person that hasn't received full forgiveness. So a lot of people were worried the first time around. This kind of sounds too good to be true. How is this a forgivable loan? It's working. If for some reason your loan isn't forgiven, maybe you decide you're not going to use the funds correctly, that's up to you, but then you'll have a 5-year term with a 1% interest rate, but it is 100% forgivable if the conditions of forgiveness are met. Next. So there's a million questions out there, but kind of some of the top questions are, can I get a second PPP loan? So if you got a first PPP loan, and what that's going to be called is the first draw, you are eligible to get the second draw PPP if you meet some certain conditions, which are going to be some size requirements. But the biggest thing is that you have to have seen a 25% reduction in one quarter of 2020 compared to the same exact quarter of 2019. So we're looking at, quarter one 2020 versus quarter one 2019, quarter two 2020 versus quarter two 2019. And when we're talking about quarter, it's calendar quarter. So January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. You can't pick and choose the different months to make a quarter. If you were not in operation in 2019 or you opened at the end of 2019, you can use quarter one of 2020 as your baseline and compare quarter 2, 3, and 4. And we're talking about gross receipts, so it's your total amount of receipts that you've received. Your PPP, your EIDL, and other grants that you've received from other sources during the pandemic do not count towards your gross receipts. If you did not receive a first draw PPP the last time around, maybe you didn't know if you were eligible, maybe you're a chamber and you weren't eligible at that time, you can now apply as long as you meet the same requirements of the original program. And then how can you apply? Everybody that wants to apply can apply through a lender that's accepting applications. As Jim mentioned, you can take a look on the SBA website. There's a lender match. We would be more than happy to take you. We have a staff ready for applications. You can see our website there, prestramosloans.org/PPP, and I'll put that in the chat later as well. Everything takes place online, but you have access to your individualized intaker that can answer questions over the phone or via email. Next. Okay, so what are the requirements of PPP and what are the rules surrounding it, just so that everybody knows and they're prepared for what they need to be able to provide and what they need to do. So the eligibility is going to be for for-profit businesses, 501c3, so nonprofit businesses, and then certain 501c6 organizations. All employees that you're going to use the eligibility for have to reside in the United States. For the first draw, it's 500 or fewer employees. For a second draw, it's 300 or fewer employees. And then you have to either pay W-2 wages to your employees, or you have to have self-employment income as a Schedule C or a 1065 partnership. And we'll talk more about the specific tax forms in a future slide. The eligible use of funds is going to be 60% needs to be used for W-2 payroll, ownership compensation replacement, group health and retirement, or unemployment tax. So 60% of your total PPP needs to be used for those payroll costs. And then the other 40% can be used for eligible expenses. And those eligible expenses are going to be rent or lease, utilities, and your utilities is going to include things like telephones, internet, water, if you propane, heat, all those, anything that basically is a utility. It's pretty flexible as long as it's justifiable. Another thing that was just added was actually cloud computing, or if you had to, if you had to start getting Zoom or Teams or some kind of other virtual type softwares, that's an eligible expense. PPE equipment for you and your employees. If you need to make some changes to your establishment or purchase items to allow for social distancing or to maintain health regulations, maybe you need to get some platforms in front of your register or between booths, those are all eligible expenses. They just can't exceed 40%. 60% must go to the payroll costs. And then the PPP terms, it's 2.5 times your average monthly payroll, up to the first $100,000 in wages per employee. And it's the same thing for self-employment income. It's up to the first $100,000 in self-employment income as well. The one exception to this is if you are a second draw borrower and you are in food service or accommodations, and your standard industry code starts with a 7.2, then you're eligible for 3.5 times, but that's only on the second draw. It's only for restaurants and accommodations. And then it's an 8 to 24 week covered period. So I'm getting a lot of questions from a lot of businesses that didn't get their first draw PPP the first time around. And they're saying, if I apply for and get my first draw, can I immediately apply for my second draw? And Jim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but at this point, we're within the 8-week window of March 31st. So if you applied today and got your funding next week, there's not enough time for you to use the funds during your covered period requirement and then apply and get approved for a second draw. So it's not possible, unless I'm wrong at this point, to get 2 PPP loans during this period.
That's correct.
Okay. Unless for some reason, Congress votes to extend the program.
Yes, and that's a possibility right now. Let's all keep our eyes and ears open.
Yep, for sure. Okay, next slide. So here we're going to get into the actual nitty-gritty of determining how much you are actually eligible for. So we're going to look at 2 things. There's really 2 things you want to look at. One, do you pay W-2 employees? And we're talking about W-2 employees where you withhold taxes from their paycheck, you give them a W-2 at the end of the year. 1099 contractors are not eligible as part of your PPP eligibility, and it's not an expense that's an eligible expense because 1099 contractors aren't actually employees of your company. They're subcontracted, they're non-employee, and they can apply for their own PPP loan. So if you've got people that you pay 1099, encourage them to apply for their own PPP loan. And the other aspect is if you're self-employed and you don't have employees, we'll be looking at the type of tax form you use to determine if you have eligibility. So it's based on your self-employment income through your taxes or your W-2 wages. Now you are able to use either 2019 or 2020 documentation. And you're eligible based on total wages that were paid. So that can be tips, it can be the hourly wage, it can be salary, it can be bonuses, the total wages up to the first $100,000 per employee. And then on top of that, if you had company paid for health insurance, dental, vision, retirement, all of those are also eligible as part of the calculation, as is state unemployment tax. Not any withholdings, but the state unemployment tax. You'll take the total of all the wages that you paid in either 2019 or in 2020, divide it by 12, and that will give you your average monthly payroll cost. And then you multiply that by 2.5, and that's your loan eligibility amount. If you're self-employed and you file a Schedule C as part of your personal taxes, then you can use line 31 of your Schedule C. So you'll pull up your Schedule C for either 2019. A lot of people haven't done it for the 2020 yet, but you can create a draft 2020 Schedule C if you haven't completed your taxes at this point. So you're going to take line 31, divide it by 12 to get your average monthly payroll cost and multiply that by 2.5. If you have negative net income, if you have $0 of net income on line 31, you're not eligible for the program. And then if you are a 1065 partnership, you have multiple members of your LLC, you're going to receive something called a K1. And the K1 is basically kind of like a W-2 for your business or from the business to you. You're going to look at line 14A of each K1. You'll add all that together, then you have to multiply it by 0.9235 in order to adjust for self-employment taxes. And then again, you're going to take that total amount for the year, divide it by 12, and multiply it by 2.5 in order to get the total amount you're eligible for. And again, for second draw borrowers that have the 7.2 standard industry code that are in food service or accommodations, you're eligible for 3.5 times instead of 2.5 times, but just remember that's only for the food and accommodations and it's only on second draw. Next. Okay, so another really important thing to remember is that you can't commingle. So maybe you're a Schedule C, you have self-employment income, and you pay W-2 wages. That's totally fine. You can provide your Schedule C and you can provide your payroll documentation, but it can only be for 1 year. You can't do your Schedule C from 2019 and your payroll wages from 2020. It all has to be in the same year. So we're going to look at a couple of different types of payroll documents that you can provide. You can provide annual forms, and the most popular one and pretty much the easiest one for us to use is the 940 federal unemployment, or FUTA. If you can go to the next slide, Carly. This is actually what that looks like. And we'll be looking for line 3, total payments to all employees. So this is the total payments that you paid throughout the year. And you would take this number, divide it by 12, and multiply it by 2.5. And that's going to give you your eligible amount based on the wages. You can use either 2019 or you can use 2020. If you are an employer, you should already have filed this because it was due on January 31st. So you should have access to it. I would recommend that you take a look at 2019 and 2020, and the one that's going to provide you the type of funding that you need for your current operations and what you expect over the next 8 to 24 weeks in your staffing. And that's the year that you want to use. Next. We can also accept W-3s and copies of W-2s for the year. If you don't have your 940, it's a little more difficult to use those, so I would recommend providing the 940 if you have it. And then quarterly forms that we're looking at are the IRS quarterly form 941, and we're looking for all 4 quarters. So we want to see 1, 2, 3, and 4 because we're going to add all those together. You can provide your annual form or you can provide your quarterly form. If you can provide both of them, that's great. That's just extra information. But really we need to see either the 940 annual form or all 4 of the quarterly forms. We can also take the state unemployment forms. So everybody should be filing an AZ UC 018. And that's the state unemployment, and any unemployment tax that you pay to the state can also be used in the calculation. And if you go to the next slide, this is what the quarterly 941 looks like. You'll see on the right-hand side in yellow that it shows the 4 different quarters. So you're going to want to have 4 different 941s. And we're going to be looking at column 1, line 5C, the taxable Medicare wages and tips. So that's the amount that we're going to be looking at and adding all 4 of those together to get your annual wages. Next. We're also going to need to get a payroll summary report. And that payroll summary report will show us each employee and the total wages that they had for either 2019 or 2020, depending on what documents you're providing. And this is really important because we need to show that nobody was paid over $100,000. And if they were, we need to remove the excess of $20,000 from the calculation that we use. And we also need to be able to look for FTE if you don't fall under one of the safe harbors. If you don't have a payroll summary report, you can provide copies of pay stubs. It's an extensive amount of work to have to go through an entire year's worth of pay stubs, but if your payroll provider cannot provide you a payroll summary report, then that's something that you can provide. Next. This is what that UC 018 looks like. If you look at tax due on line 4, that's an amount that you can add to your eligibility when we're determining what you're eligible for. So it's all of your wages, any company paid for, health, dental, vision, 401k, pension. But just remember that is the company sponsored portion, not the amount that's being withheld from your employee's paycheck, because that amount is already included in the gross wages. So that would be double counting. It's the amount that you as the employer are paying on behalf of your employees, plus the amount that you've paid for unemployment to the state. Next. If you are, these are additional documents that you're going to want to provide, and then also tax returns that you're going to want to provide in addition to your W-2 payroll information, or if you're self-employed. So if you are a sole proprietor, you're probably not going to have articles of organization because you don't have an LLC. So you won't have articles. But if you are an LLC, if you're corporated, if you're a chamber, if you're any other kind of organization, you should have articles of organization, and they should be filed with the Arizona Corporation Commission. So if you don't have access to them, you don't have them saved, you can go to the Arizona Corporation Commission website and you can actually pull down a copy of those. You're also going to need to provide owner verification information. If you are a nonprofit or a chamber, there's no owner. So an authorized signer on behalf of the company will provide information. You don't have to provide your social security number, but you will need to provide identification to show that you are who you say you are. Everybody else will have to provide a social security number and home address, personal information, because you are the owner of the business. And then the types of tax returns we're looking for. If you are a sole proprietor, if you're a single member LLC, if you file a Schedule C, that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at your 1040 tax return. We're going to look at the Schedule C. And again, we're looking at line 31 of Schedule C to determine your eligibility. If you're a partnership, you file a 1065 tax return, and we'll need the 1065 tax return along with each one of the K1s to each of the partners, because we're going to be looking at line 14A and adding all of the K1s together. And then finally, if you are a corporation, you will file an 1120 or an 1120S tax form. You don't have to provide your taxes, because the only way you are eligible to get access to the program is through W-2 wages, because there's no self-employment income. That's the same thing that goes for nonprofits that file a 990 tax return or a similar tax return. If there's no ownership, if there's no self-employment income, then you're going to want to provide those W-2 income forms, either the 940 or the 941s that we talked about. Next. Just for demonstration purposes, if you're not familiar with what an IRS Schedule C looks like, this is a part of the personal tax return. It's just a supplemental schedule that's profit and loss from a business. Your information is up top, and then on line 31, we're looking for positive net income. And again, it'll be divided by 12, multiplied by 2.5. Next. Okay, so just a quick reminder of how you can use the PPP loan. So one thing that can be very confusing is that your eligibility for what the amount you're actually eligible for, again, is only based on wages and employer benefits that are paid by the employer and unemployment. That's what it's based on, or self-employment income. But what you can use it for is different. So a lot of people think, well, I have rent, I've got utilities, so I can add that to the amount to increase the amount I'm eligible for. And that's not where the eligibility is based. It's only based on your wages that you've paid or your self-employment income. But you can use it for way more expansive amounts of things. And those are going to include business rent or lease, utilities, if you have a mortgage or a fixed loan, maybe you have another SBA loan, you can use it for the interest only portion. You can't prepay, and you can't use it for the actual payment. And one other important thing to note is that these needed to be in effect on February 15th, 2020, because you have to have been in operation February 15th, 2020 in order to be eligible for this program. And then other operating expenditures are going to be what we mentioned before: software, cloud computing. Maybe you needed to do some new human resources recruiting because there was some difficulty in staffing, accounting needs, if you need some additional assistance pulling documents together, especially for these types of programs. Those are all eligible uses. If you had property damage that resulted out of the 2020 public disturbances that were not covered by insurance or another source, then you can make repairs utilizing the funds. And then also worker protection, so PPE, any adaptive instruments. Again, if you need to get sneeze guards, those are all types of things. These eligible expenses just can't exceed 40%, because 60% needs to be used for payroll. And again, the payroll portion is going to be any wages, unemployment insurance just for the state, and then any company sponsored health or retirement benefits. Next. So for second draw borrowers, if you got your first draw, it's basically the same eligibility. You have to have been eligible for your first draw to get your second draw. There's a reduction in the number of employees, so it's a cap of 300 as opposed to 500. It's also been reduced from 10 million down to 2 million. Your business must have been in operation on February 15th, 2020. And by operation, you had to have some kind of income or some kind of expenses. Your business had to be operating. Maybe you were a sole proprietor and you didn't incorporate until later in the year. That's fine. It's not based on the LLC. It's based on were you actually operating and functioning as a business on February 15th, 2020. And most lenders will require that you provide either a bank statement or payroll stubs or a general ledger or some other type of proof that you were in operation on February 15th, 2020. You also have to demonstrate that there was a 25% reduction in one quarter of 2020 compared to 2019. Or again, if you weren't in operation for all of 2019 or at the end of 2019, or you started early in 2020, you can use quarter 1 of 2020 compared to quarter 2, 3, or 4 of 2020. If your loan is $150,000 or under, you don't have to provide the documentation up front. You just have to attest to it, but you will have to provide documentation when it comes time to apply for forgiveness. You'll be able to provide tax returns. You'll be able to provide, you can do a profit and loss statement that compares the quarters or year over year. If it's not prepared by an outside accountant, if it's prepared by the company, you'll have to sign it. But again, that's $150,000 is that cutoff. If your loan is going to be under $150,000, you don't have to provide it up front, but you will eventually have to provide it. You will have to attest that you've seen that deduction. So I'd really make sure that you did have that deduction before you apply. And then if you're $150,000 or over, you will have to provide that documentation up front. And again, that can be tax returns, it can be quarterly profit and loss statements. Worst case scenario, if you have to pull your bank statements for each month and provide those as well, you can do that as well. And then in terms of lender choice, if you were happy with the first lender that you used for your PPP 1 draw and you want to use them for your second draw and they're accepting applications, you can use them. If you want to switch to somebody else, you're able to do that. You are not required to use the same lender that you used for the first PPP. And there are certain lending institutions, some community banks that aren't doing second draw PPP. So it's up to you who you use. Again, we're accepting applications for first or second draw. There's no stipulations in terms of having to have been a client of ours. You can also look at the lender match on the SBA website to find a lender that's going to suit your needs. Next. I have access to, or I created this evaluation spreadsheet, and I will be happy to link it in the chat once I'm done presenting. If you go to the next slide, it actually gives an example. If you don't have your regular financial statements, or you don't have access to an accounting software, and maybe you're just looking at your bank statements for your total deposits for the month, this spreadsheet is kind of nifty because you can just pop in your gross receipts for 2019 and 2020, and it automatically calculates whether you meet the eligibility requirements of that 25% reduction. Just remember that any first draw PPP, your EIDL advance or an EIDL loan, or any other types of grants that you may have gotten, Arizona Community Foundation or City of Phoenix or one of the other cities, if you got a grant that was for COVID relief, you don't have to consider that as part of your gross receipts. It's just your normal sales or however you typically receive and generate income. Okay, next. Okay, so when and how to apply. You can apply now. It's open to all eligible first and second draw applicants. You can work with a participating lender by looking on the SBA website, or you can apply with us. Our website's open now. Eligibility, again, is based on the W-2 wages that you've paid to your employees, or your self-employment or self-income, or a combination of those two items depending on your circumstances. We're looking again for self-employment income. We're looking at line 31 of your Schedule C or line 14A of that K1 on a 1065. Remember that if you have an 1120 or 1120S, that will have a K1, but that K1 does not demonstrate any kind of eligibility because as a corporation, Your business is a separate entity and it's not considered self-employment income for tax purposes or for the purposes of this program. Another thing to note, there's been a lot of questions about Schedule E income. That's individuals who have rental properties or some other types of income. That's not considered self-employment income by the IRS, so it doesn't count as income for the PPP purposes. So if you have rental properties, those don't count for purposes of eligibility. Your first draw has to be less than 500 employees, and that's the FTE, so the full-time equivalency of employees. And then the second draw, 300 employees or less, and you have to have had that 25% reduction. If your PPP is going to be over $150,000, you have to demonstrate that upfront through tax returns, financials, or bank statements. And then everybody's favorite is the forgiveness portion. The PPP is 100% forgivable. Just remember that you need to use it in the correct way. Over 60% at least has to be used for those eligible payroll costs. And the question I get a lot is, can I use 100% for payroll? Yes, that's great. That's even preferable. It makes applying for forgiveness easiest if you use it all for payroll. The other 40% can be used for eligible expenses. And again, those are rent, lease, utilities, PPE, property damage, cloud computing, all those types of things that we've talked about before. It just can't exceed 40%. One thing to note about forgiveness is that if you were only to use 50% for payroll and you used 50% for other eligible expenses, it's not an all or nothing, it's a sliding scale of forgiveness. So it would just be reduced by that 10% that you didn't use for payroll. Self-employed. So if you're self-employed and you're using your Schedule C or your 1065K1, 100% of that is, you are able to use that for owner compensation replacement. So you can do a draw, you can transfer funds into your personal account, you can use it for your business expenses because that's your self-employment income. You just want to make sure that you're using that over a 10-week period as opposed to just an 8-week period. And then there are some rules around maintaining full-time equivalency headcounts, as long as there's some safe harbors that I actually posted in the chat that talked about the safe harbors. Most businesses qualify under the safe harbors because of COVID restrictions and not being able to operate at full capacity or running into difficulties in bringing employees back onto staff. And next. Some additional resources that we have at Prestamos. We have the Prime program, which is no cost assistance. We provide assistance in a variety of areas from accounting, marketing, social media, coaching. This is geared towards supporting micro entrepreneurs, especially those that are disadvantaged and that are in rural communities or opportunity or hub zones. This is sponsored in part by the SBA. That's how it's a no-cost program. We also do a variety of webinars and events, so you can feel free to look at our events page. We're doing stuff all the time. And then we were also just awarded the Women's Business Center that we're in the process of launching. And while it's called Women's Business Center, we can support anybody, but it will be geared towards supporting women. We'll have both in-person and virtual programming, and you can sign up for the interest list for the services that we'll be providing there on our website as well. And next. We also do lending. We do micro lending anywhere from $1,500 all the way up to $1 million and more. We have a lot of different types of programs. If you check out the website, I know there's a question also about that in the chat, but feel free to look at the website. And next. And I think that's it. So we can go to, I wanted to get to questions because I know we're butting up on time and there's some questions in the chat. So I'll stop my promotion.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. What a wealth of information. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Amber. We do have a fair amount of questions in the chat. And I was looking in the chat. It looks like, Amber, you might have your setting to only reply to panelists. So I see that you were answering some questions.
Oh, okay. Yep.
I want to ensure everyone gets those answers. So if we want to start, I know that you had responded to Michelle's first question here. in the first PPP loan, there was stipulation that you must bring FTEs back to pre-COVID levels. Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I actually just copy and pasted my message. Thank you for
Perfect.
letting me know that. So
Sure, of course. I did see one that came in also in the Q&A, that 25% reduction, that is a hard eligibility requirement, correct?
Yes.
that is for the second draw. If they did not receive a first draw, they don't have to demonstrate the 25%, but for the second, yes.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying. And then I also see if I received an EIDL loan last year in round 1 and now received a first round PPP, sorry, scrolling. What would happen? What are the steps now? Can they still add the existing EIDL to the new PPP loan for forgiveness?
I put in the chat here, the EIDL must have been funded between January 31st and April 3rd. Here in Arizona, the declaration for disaster hadn't even been signed at that point. So I don't think it's possible for anybody that's in Arizona to this is a very, I don't know if anybody is able to actually take advantage of that. So you're probably not able to refinance.
Okay.
But Carly, send that one to me and I'm going to run it up the flagpole.
Sure.
Would you please? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Just to be certain, and also to track if there's any possibility of a change or what have you.
Sure, definitely.
Thank you.
Do we need to have our 2020 taxes filed before we file for the second round?
Go ahead, Amber.
You can use either 2019 or 2020.
Perfect. And to follow up on that, so a K1 form from 2019 can be used, correct?
Yes.
As long as there's positive, and only for a 1065, and there has to be positive income on line 14A of the K1.
Okay. I received notification from my lender, Prestamos, that my PPP loan was approved on 1/19. However, I've yet to receive the funds. So do you have an estimated timeline of the funding?
Typically, it takes about 7 days. I'm not sure if it's, there's a couple of stages that the applications go through. And I will say that this time around, the first time the SBA was using a different approval system, it was called eTran, and we would submit it to the SBA and we would get a reply instantaneously with an approval code. That is not happening this time around because there was a lot of fraud happening and a lot of lack of eligibility. And maybe, I don't know, Jim, if you want to speak a little bit more on this topic.
We're watching that carefully. We're trying, Congress has asked us to be a little bit more prudent this time around, and it has slowed the process up for sure. So that's the best explanation I can give you. And I think there's a lot of folks that certainly understand that we're caretakers of those taxpayer dollars, and we're being a little bit more careful this time around. But bear with us. We'll get ramped up. Promise.
Things are moving along a lot quicker now too. In the beginning, it was taking a little bit longer, but now it seems to be moving, 24 to 48 hours on average, unless there's an issue that has to be researched, and then there's that research time gets added.
Awesome.
Carly, I see someone just asked if we can share the deck. Would you address that, Carly?
Yes, so within the next, either later today or early morning, you will receive the recording of this presentation as well as Amber and Jim's slide decks. I know there's a lot of information in there, so we want to ensure that you can follow up afterwards as well. One question coming in here: to be eligible for the first PPP loan, how do you determine or calculate how many employees you have?
That's the FTE equivalency. So you would add, the simple way to do it is add all the hours that are worked, and you can do it in a week period maybe, and divide it by 8, or a day period and divide it by 8. And that gives you your daily FTE. So you can have many part-time employees, but together they don't, I guess weekly would probably be the best way to do it, would be, 40 hours a week. So add all of the weekly hours together and divide it, by 40, and that would give you your FTE. So that FTE number needs to be 500 or less for the first draw, 300 or less for the second draw.
Wonderful. Let's see, we've got a couple more coming in. I'm using Schedule C as sole proprietorship. You've mentioned 100% can be used for owner compensation. Right now, I still have some sales, which makes the total pay for 10 weeks, pay from the sale plus PPP amount. Is this all right to exceed the monthly payroll, adding PPP amount granted?
I'm not super clear on this question, but I think I'll answer this in a way that hopefully will give the answer. You're eligible to pay yourself up to the equivalency of $100,000 per year using the PPP funds.
Okay.
So that's really it's based on your PPP funds. Now, if you pay yourself over $100,000 for the year, that's fine. You just can't use anything over $100,000 as a part of that PPP proceeds.
Awesome, thank you.
I think that answers the question. If not, feel free to reach out and we can have a one-on-one conversation.
Sure. Another about 2020, do we need to have 2020 tax returns prepared to file for PPP2 for an LLC? I've seen a few in there, so are you encountering where different lenders are requiring that?
The interesting thing about this program, Congress writes the law and then they give it to the SBA and say enforce the law. And then the SBA issues guidance, and some of the guidance is incredibly clear, some of it's a little more flexible. And then each individual lender has their own internal policies and their own underwriting guidelines. So it's going to vary from lender to lender. Some lenders are going to require it, other lenders are not. So it's just a matter of the lender and specifically what they're asking you for.
Awesome, thank you.
And thank you, Amber. I'll add a little bit to that. The lenders, our lender relations group is working hard with our lenders, trying to soften some of the confusion because like Amber just mentioned, the lenders they have their internal requirements, and some of them are taking a different approach. And we're trying to get them to best information that they can possibly have, so that they don't confuse the public any more than it's actually happening right now. So I know we're about out of time right now, and I just want to emphasize that please have everybody go to our state website. Look at the yellow band that you're going to see on our homepage, COVID-19. You're going to see a lot of the information that has been shared. And again, this is being recorded, and we will furnish the PowerPoints to all folks, right, Carly?
Yes,
and,
yes, absolutely.
If you still have questions, we're not hiding. We're look at us. We're not hard to work with. We will answer your questions. Please send emails to us. We all know how to use our electronics. Our cell phones work too. So please get them to us. And I promise everybody that's on this call, nobody will be left unattended. We will get an answer for you. It may take us a little bit, but we will get an answer for you. We're not one of these offices that talks about helping people. We actually pride ourselves in helping people. And we do it with people like the two that you're looking at right now, Amber and Carly. I've got to run. I've got an emergency that I got to take care of here in the office. But thank you so much, everybody. And look forward to working with everybody and answering those critical questions we know you all have. So I hope we did a good job today.
Thanks so much, Jim. And thank you so much, Amber, for joining us and providing our members in our community with these tools and the resources and the knowledge needed to move forward. And thank you to the Industrial Development Authority of the City of Chandler for helping us to put on programs such as this. And just to remind you, we will be sending out the recording with the slide decks. Please feel free to follow up with any questions that we weren't able to get to today. And we hope that you will join us next week on February 11th. We're going to be joined by TV host Gail Bass, and she's going to be talking about steps to take to achieve greatness and how that includes saying yes to uncomfortable situations. So we will see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.